Assalamualaikum students. We're going to start online lectures and this is your subject Managerial Economics. This is your lecture number 1 and this is chapter number 8. I'm your teacher Shumaila Zarin. As we have completed our chapters before the midterm exams that have not been conducted yet. Um, So that is the course we are going to start after finishing some cost of production and profit maximization theories. This is our topic of interest is managing in competitive, monopolistic, and monopolistically competitive markets. This is chapter number 8. And first of all, this chapter is telling about the market structures. And first market structure that we are more concerned is perfect competition. We begin our analysis by examining the output decisions of the managers operating in perfectly competitive markets. The key conditions for perfect competition are as follows. There are many buyers and sellers in the market, and each of which is small relative to the market. Number two is each firm in the market produces an identical product. And third is buyers and sellers have perfect information. Fourth one is there are no transaction costs. And fifth characteristics or the attributes of perfect competition is there is free entry and exit. Taken together, the first four assumptions imply that no single firm can influence the price of the product. The fact that there are many small firms each selling an identical product means that consumers view the products of all firms in the market as perfect substitutes. Because there is perfect information, consumers know the quality and price of each firm's product. There are no transaction costs, such as the cost of traveling to a store. If one firm charged a slightly high price than the other firms, consumers would not shop at the firm, but instead would purchase from a firm charging a lower price. Thus, in perfectly competitive market, all firms charge the same price for the good, and this price is determined by intersection or interaction of all buyers and sellers in the market. The assumption of free entry and exit simply implies that additional firms can enter the market if economic profits are being earned, and firms are free to leave the market if they are sustaining loss. This assumption implies that in long run, firms operating in a perfectly competitive market earn zero economic profits. So these were the main characteristics of the perfectly competitive market, and the basic classic example of this market is agriculture. There are many farmers, and each is so small relative to the market that he or she has no perceptible impact or negligible impact on the prices of corn, wheat, pork, or beef. Agriculture products or agricultural products tend to be homogeneous or same. There is little difference between corn produced by Farmer Jones and corn produced by Farmer Smith. The retail mail order market for computer software and computer memory chips also is close to perfect competition. All the sellers, they are producing the same product. There are so many competitors in the market, so the changing of the price by one seller that has impact on the other sellers. It means if one seller or one producer will lower down the price, all the buyers, all the consumers will shift to that seller. So that's why in perfectly competitive market the prices that will remain same. Now you can go through this video for a further explanation of the perfect competition.
Welcome to Economics 101. Today we will talk about one of the four basic economic market models, the perfect competition. Perfect competition is a market structure in which competition is at its greatest possible level. This is when many firms offer a homogeneous product. A homogeneous product is one that cannot be distinguished from competing products from different suppliers. Perfect competition is considered theoretical because nothing in the market can be completely perfect or homogeneous. For example, mobile phones vary in the methodology of product size, brand identity, etc. The concept of perfect competition, however, is useful because it functions as a standard to measure the efficiency and effectiveness of real world markets. A perfectly competitive market exhibits the following characteristics. 1. There are many buyers and sellers in the market. The market contains large number of small firms, each is relatively small compared to the overall size of the market. 2. Each company makes a similar product, termed as homogeneous goods. Buyers cannot tell which firm produces a given product. 3. There are no barriers to entry into or exit from the market. Firms can enter or exit anytime. 4. Buyers have access to information about the product being sold by each firm, such that one firm cannot set a higher price than other firms. 5. No single firm can influence the market price or market conditions. Market price is determined by the supply and demand. The agricultural industry probably comes closest to exhibiting perfect competition. In this business, there are large number of producers and they produce a homogeneous product. One farmer's carrots is very much like another farmer's carrots. It would be a bad decision for any farmer to set a higher price. As a result, no individual producer or farmer can control the price. The price is set by the interaction of supply and demand. Firms can make normal profit. That is the level of profit that firms need to remain competitive in the market. Under perfect competition, in the short run, firms can make supernormal profits or losses. In the long run, other firms are attracted to the industry when current firms are making supernormal profits. The effect is the shifting of industry supply curve to the right, driving down the price until all supernormal profits are exhausted. If the firms suffer from losses, they will leave the market, which in then shifts the industry supply curve to the left, which then raises the price. Let's look at the benefits of perfect competition. 1. There are no barriers to entry, so existing firms cannot derive any monopoly power. 2. Advertising is not needed because there is a perfect knowledge and firms can sell all they can produce. 3. No firm in the market can make abnormal profit in the long run. Perfect combination also has its disadvantages. 1. There is no incentive for sellers to innovate or add more features to the product. 2. Since there is a very little barrier to entry, old firms cannot afford to be self-satisfied because chances of losing market share to new firms always loom over them. 3. Lack of supernormal profits may mean investment in research and development is unlikely. That's it for perfect combination. Thank you for watching this video.
So, this was all about the characteristics of a perfect competition, and it is also showing that advantages and disadvantages of the perfect competition. If anyone will lower down the price or they will increase the price, it has some disadvantages. Next, we are going to show the demand at the market and the firm's level. As you know, that no single firm operating in perfectly competitive market exerts any impact on price. So price is determined by the interaction of all buyers and sellers in the market. The firm manager must charge this market price or consumers will purchase from a firm charging a lower price. Before we characterize the profit maximizing output decision of the firm or the managers operating in perfectly competitive market, it is important to explain more precisely the relation between the market demand for a product and demand for a product produced by an individual perfectly competitive market. So the demand curve for an individual firm's product in a perfectly competitive market is simply the market price. In a competitive market, price is determined by the intersections of the market supply and demand curves. Because the market supply and demand curve depends on all buyers and sellers, the market price is outside the control of single perfectly competitive firm. In other words, because the individual firm is small relative to the market, it has no impact or it has negligible influence on the market price. So this figure 8.1 shows the distinction between the market demand curve and the demand curve facing a perfectly competitive firm. The left hand panel shows the market where the equilibrium price is determined by the intersection of the market supply and demand curves. From the individual firm's point of view, the firm can sell as much as it wishes at a price of PE, that is equilibrium price. Thus, the demand curve facing an individual perfectly competitive firm is given by the horizontal line in the right hand panel labeled demand for firm that is equal to the price of or the equilibrium price. The fact that the individual firm's demand curve is perfectly elastic reflects the fact that if the firm charged a price even slightly above the market price, it would sell nothing. Thus, in a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve for an individual firm product is simply the market price. So you can see that The demand curve is perfectly elastic. It means there are large number of substitutes available. There are so many seller and buyers and they have no impact on the market price. Since the demand curve for an individual perfectly competitive firm's product is perfectly elastic, the pricing decision of the individual firm is trivial. Charge the price that every other firm in the industry charges. All that remains is to determine how much output should be produced to maximize the profit. Now we are concerned about the short run output decisions. In perfectly competitive market, the firm they can maximize the profit, minimize the losses, and they have the shortened firm and industry supply curves. To maximize the profit in the short run, the manager must take as given the fixed inputs and determine how much output to produce given the variable inputs that are within his or her control. First of all, in the short run, the firm has the decision to maximize the profit and the firm has the equilibrium when marginal cost must equal to the marginal revenue. And the marginal revenue is the change in revenue attributable to the last unit of output for a competitive firm. Marginal revenue is the market price that can be shown by the change or taking the derivative with respect to quantity. It means the marginal revenue can be written as dr over dq, that is change in revenue or the change in revenue divided by change in quantity. It is showing the additional revenue. And first equation that is showing the functional form means that is showing R is equals to RQ, that is the functional form of this structure, marginal revenue. In this diagram, this figure 8.2, that is actually showing how could you maximize the profit. So this profit can be maximized. First of all, the profit that can be written as total revenue minus total cost, and geometrically profits are given by the vertical distance between the cost function labeled CQ in figure A2 and the revenue line. Note that for output level to the left of point A, the cost curve lies above the revenue line, which implies that the firm would incur losses if it produced any output to the left of point A. The same is true of the output level to the right of point B. For output levels between the point A and point B, the revenue line lies above the cost curve. This implies that these outputs generate positive level of profit. The profit maximizing level of output is that level at which the vertical distance between the revenue line and the cost curve is greatest. So there is a very important geometric property at the profit maximizing level of output as we see in figure 8.2. The slope of cost curve at the max profit maximizing level of output point E exactly equals the slope of the revenue line. Recall that the slope of cost curve is marginal cost and the slope of revenue line is marginal revenue. Therefore, the profit maximizing output is the output at which marginal revenue equals the marginal cost. That is the very important market equilibrium condition. The manager must equate the market price with marginal cost to maximize the profit. So, this is the main principle competitive firms demand. The demand curve for a competitive firm's product is a horizontal line at the market price. This price is the competitive firm's marginal revenue. This is demand curve that is equals to the price which is average revenue and that will be equals to the marginal revenue. An alternative way to express the competitive output rule is depicted in figure A3 where standard average and marginal cost curves have been drawn. You can see that on the vertical axis there is price is given, on the horizontal axis there is quantity is given, and they have drawn the perfectly elastic demand curve of the perfectly elastic market where the average revenue must equals to the marginal revenue is equals to demand curve. As you know, the basic condition of the equilibrium, that is marginal revenue must equals to the marginal cost. So we have to draw the marginal cost curve that must intercept the marginal revenue to draw the equilibrium line. If the market price is given by the price of the equilibrium PE, this price intercepts the marginal cost curve at an output of Q steric. Thus, Q steric represents the profit maximizing level of output. For output below Q steric, price exceeds marginal cost. This implies that by expanding output, the firm can sell additional units at a price that exceeds the cost of producing the additional units. Thus, a profit maximizing firm will not choose to produce output level below Q steric. Similarly, output levels above Q steric corresponds the situation in which marginal cost exceeds price. In this instance, a reduction in output will reduce costs by more than it will reduce revenue. Thus, Q static is the profit maximizing level of output. In this diagram, we have to draw the average cost that is shown by ATC to show whether the firm is facing loss or getting the profit, as this is the first condition of the profit maximization under perfect competition. And the rule of profit maximization is the revenue must greater than cost. So the cost line must lie below the revenue curve. So this is the average cost curve that we have completed in our previous lecture. In previous chapter, we have explained fully the cost behaviors, and in the shaded rectangle in figure A3 shows the maximum profits of the firm. To see this, note that the area of the shaded rectangle is given by its base Q static times the height. So the most concerning point is the difference between the price line and the cost curve, the area between both that is showing the profits. And this is important to draw the line from the equilibrium condition, that is marginal cost is equals to marginal revenue. That is the average cost curve U shaped, and this is the marginal cost curve that is showing the equilibrium condition. You will draw the line from the marginal cost and to the average cost curve. This is showing the average revenue, this is showing the average cost. So, whenever the average revenue is greater than average cost, it means the firm is getting profit. This is the second principle of the competitive output rule, is to maximize profits. A perfectly competitive firm produces the output at which price equals marginal cost in the range over which marginal cost is increasing. So price is the marginal cost. And so this is the short run condition of the firm, that the firm can also face some loss, and they can minimize the loss. And this diagram, this is showing the short run operating losses. So consider a first situation where there are some fixed cost of production. Suppose the market price, that is PE, lie below the average cost but above the average variable cost. So this figure, if the firm produces the output Q static where price is equals to marginal cost, a loss of the shaded area will result. However, since the price exceeds the average variable cost, If this price exceeds the average variable cost, each unit sold generates more revenue than the cost per unit of the variable inputs. Thus, the firm should continue to produce in the short run even though it is incurring losses. So you can see in the previous diagram, we have only drawn the average cost curve for showing the maximizing the profit. But in this diagram, the extra curve has been drawn, that is average variable cost, to show that if the firm is bearing or facing the losses, whether they have to shut down or not. So first of all, they have drawn the marginal revenue curve and then they have drawn the marginal cost curve to show the equilibrium condition. Here it is equilibrium. This is actually the operating losses. This is the short run condition of the firm. In previous diagram, whenever the revenue is greater than cost, the firm is getting the profit. And in this diagram, if the firm is incurring more cost, so it means they are facing the loss. They have drawn the cost curve here above the price line and they have drawn this average variable cost if the firm is facing loss, whether the firm or industry or the organization will run or not. So in this case, this average variable cost is lying below the price line or the marginal revenue line or the average revenue line. So that's why the firm is get facing the loss, but they are not stopping, or they are not shutting down the industry, because in this case they are minimizing the losses. And how they are showing that loss, they are getting the loss or not, it means they are getting the facing the more cost and they are getting the revenue that is less than loss. So it means this, in this condition the firm is getting the loss but they are not shutting down. And this here, they are facing the loss, but now they are taking the decision to shut down. In this diagram, in the previous diagram, they have shown that they have fixed cost that would have to be paid even if the firm decided to shut down its operation. Um, Therefore, the firm would not earn zero economic profits if it shut down, but will instead realize a loss equal to these fixed costs. This is the loss, and you can see that this is the average cost curve, and this is the average variable cost curve, and the difference between both is the fixed cost. It means they are bearing the fixed cost since the price in this figure exceeds the average variable cost of producing Q static unit of output. The firm earns revenue on each unit sold that are more than enough to cover the variable cost of producing each unit. By producing Q static unit of output, the firm is able to put an amount of money into its cash drawer that exceeds the variable cost of producing these units and thus contributes towards the firm's payment of fixed cost. In short run, while the firm in figure 8.4 suffers a short run loss by operating, this loss is less than the loss that would result if the firm completely shut down its operation. So, here the third condition, the decision to shut down. Now, suppose that the market price is so low that it lies below the average variable cost, as in figure 8.5, if the firm produced Q static where PE is equals to marginal cost in the range of increasing marginal cost, it would incur a loss equal to the sum of two shaded rectangles. In other words, for each unit sold, the firm would be average total cost minus PE. When the per unit loss is multiplied by Q steric, negative profits result that correspond to the sum of two shaded rectangles in figure 8.5. You can see that they have drawn the curves as the firm they have decided to shut down. First of all, for the loss, they have drawn this average cost curve that is above the average revenue, the firm is facing the loss. After that, whether the factory that has to run or to be shut it down, we have drawn the average variable cost. If this price is less than average variable cost, the factory will closed. If this price is above or equal to the average variable cost, so factory will run. In this case, the average variable cost that is lying above the price line, so it means they will shut down. They will take the decision to shut down the factory. So here they have drawn the marginal cost, they have drawn the equilibrium, and from the equilibrium line, they have touched to the average variable cost and to the average total cost. And in this case, losses would equal its fixed cost, that is, those costs that must be paid even if no output is to produced. So these are the losses. If shut down, it means they are not able to pay even the fixed cost. So here the average variable cost curve that is lying above the price line. So this is the third principle, very important principle to describe the short run output decisions of the firm to maximize short run profits. A perfectly competitive firm should produce in the range of increasing marginal cost where price is equals to marginal cost, provided that price greater than equals to average variable cost. It means if P or the price line that will be greater than average variable cost, the factory will run, and if price is less than average variable cost, the firm should shut down its plant to minimize its losses. And this is the condition that in perfectly competitive firm, here the there will be the short run supply curve of the firm. We can draw the supply curve of the firm, the area that lies above the minimum of the average variable cost, that is showing the short run supply curve of an individual firm. So this is the area from here to that is the minimum of average variable cost, the area that lie above the minimum of average variable cost, that is marginal cost, because the marginal cost is showing as you produce more, you have to bear more, or you have to produce more, you have to face more cost. So this is the phenomena with the supply curve also, and this marginal cost has given the name of supply curve also. And according to this, the supply means whenever you produce, it means there is positive relationship between price and quantity. As the price is going to increase, the quantity will also go to increase. So it means this is showing the shortened supply curve. You can also go through this video to further get the information about this shortened phenomena.
In this tutorial, I'm going to discuss perfect competition. This is the first video in a series of 3 videos. The second video has numbers and calculations, and the last video, video number 3, deals with calculus. Again, this is the first video, and I introduce the topics of perfect competition. An assumption we make in perfect competition, there's lots of buyers and lots of sellers. Think something like eBay. There's a lot of market knowledge, which might be a stretch. For every buyer that disappears, a new one appears. Same with sellers. Easy entrance and exit to the market. Also, very important, what we also assume, if we draw in the individual demand curve, and also I'll draw in the market demand. The market demand curve. Be a group of yellow, there he is. Changes in individual demand have no impact on market demand, or very, very small, minor impact on market demand. Now I'll make the same assumption about market supply. Here's individual supply, one supplier and a market supply. Changes in individual supply have no impact on market supply. Now, if I draw in market supply and market demand, price, the purple there, and that's our market quantity, price is fixed. In other words, suppliers and buyers see price as fixed and they're price takers. I'm going to put quantity on the x-axis and cost per unit on the y-axis. And price is fixed for an individual supplier. That's what this is. And marginal revenue and price and demand are all the same thing. That's the marginal cost curve, the average total cost curve, and finally the average variable cost curve. A supplier will produce a quantity where right there at that point where marginal cost, MC, is equal to marginal revenue, or MR. That's where profits are maximized. Now the cost for the individual supplier, I'll draw a green line up to the average total cost curve, and then across, and this is our cost per unit. Total revenue is this rectangle here, the purple rectangle, and it's simply price times quantity. That's the area. I can also do the same thing for cost. Total cost is cost times quantity, or the area of the green rectangle. Total revenue minus total cost is equal to economic profit. And economic profit includes opportunity costs. So visually, I can take this purple, which is total revenue, and the green, which is total cost, and the dark purple area is actually profits now. And I'll make that gray, see it a little easier. Profits. The width of that rectangle is Q, or quantity. And the height is simply price minus cost. So profit, so it turns out quantity times price minus cost, in parentheses, is equal to profits, or the area of that gray rectangle. Now really, the supplier can supply at a different quantity, for example here, but at this point, cost is equal to price, so economic profits are zero here at that point in time. If the supplier decides to produce at this level of quantity, cost is there, price is still there, so I'll draw that green over there. So cost, that's the cost level right there. And the gray area is profit. And the supplier can increase his profit by increasing quantity. So at this point in time, I'll move those over, you'll see that cost goes down even a little bit further. And so the new profit is that large gray rectangle. Let me draw that back in like that. But in economics, we say profit is maximized where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, or this point right here. So we'll gain additional revenue by increasing quantity. And I'll delete a little bit of that gray so it's right there. Okay. So that's total profits. So it turns out profit is maximized while marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. Profit is maximized. This is a very important concept. Marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Profits are maximized at this point. Draw everything back in. Now imagine, since there's a lot of profit, people enter the market. Suppliers, more suppliers enter the market, and they force the price down. The market price down. So profits are reduced. But marginal cost still equals marginal revenue. So the individual supplier also has to lower his price or her price. So now additional suppliers enter the market because some money can still be made. Pushing price down even further until cost is equal to price. And the individual supplier reduces quantity. With this new quantity, we draw that back in. That quantity there, price is the purple line. Price. And also cost is the green line there, and cost and price are the same. Economic profits equals zero. More suppliers may actually enter the market as well at this point in time. They didn't get the memo, the prices are falling. So now we have a new quantity, and we have a cost now, right there, that green line right there, a cost which is above price. So there's a loss, an economic loss, actually, I should say. Let me draw the average variable cost curve back in. Prices can fall to that level right there, and we call this the shutdown point. Any price below here and the firm's shut down. So right here we have a quantity of Q, and let me put the cost in as well. It's that green line right there for cost. So at this point in time, there's a large economic loss. There's still firms in the market. There's still people willing to supply as long as they cover their day-to-day costs, cover their opportunity costs, and covering average variable cost at this point in time. It turns out that that part of the marginal cost curve is the supply curve for the individual supplier in this case. So up next is the same type of example, except I'll use numbers, and this will help you understand the concept even better.
So I hope you have understood the concepts regarding the supply curve, regarding the loss, regarding the profit. So we are going towards the long run decisions of the perfect competition as we discussed about the short run decision of the firm, and in case of short run the perfectly competitive firm that will maximize the profit and that will minimize the loss, and here that is the condition of the shutdown. But in the long run the firm will always earn the normal profit. They will always earn no profit, no loss condition. So here, that is very important concept of the long run decisions, and one important assumption underlying the theory of perfect competition is that of free entry and exit. If firms earn short-run economic profits in the long run, additional firms will enter the industry in an attempt to get some of those profits. So as more firms enter in the industry supply curve that will shift to the right. This is illustrated in this figure 8.8 as the shift from S0 to S1, which lowers the equilibrium market price from P0 to P1. This shifts down the demand curve for an individual firm's product, which in turn lowers its profit. If firms in a competitive industry sustain short-run losses, in the long run they will exit the industry since they are not covering their opportunity costs. As firms exit the industry, the market supply curve shifts from S0 to S2, thus increasing the market price from P0 to P2, thus in turn shifts up the demand curve for an individual firm's product, which increases the profits of the firms remaining in the industry. The process just described continues until ultimately the market price is such that all firms in the market earns zero economic profits. Thus in figure 8.9 at the price of PE, each firm receives just enough to cover the average costs of the production. Average cost is used because in the long run there is no distinction between fixed and variable cost, and economic profits are zero. If economic profits were positive, entry would occur and the market price would fall until the demand curve for an individual firm's product was just tangent to the average cost curve. If economic profits were negative, exit would occur, increasing the market price until the firm demand curve was tangent to the average cost curve. You can see that in this long run decision, the marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, first of all, and then average cost is equals to average revenue. It means this is the long run competitive equilibrium. They are getting the profit and they're getting the economic profit, no loss condition. So, the main principle in this case, the long run competitive firm produce a level of output such that number one, price must equal to the marginal cost, and number two, the price must equal to the minimum of average cost. So that these long run properties of the perfectly competitive markets have two important welfare implications. First, that I have discussed, price must equals to the marginal cost. The market price reflects the value to society of an individual unit of output, and marginal cost reflects the cost to society of producing another unit of output. The second thing to note about long run equilibrium is that the price equals the minimum point on the average cost curve. This implies not only that firms are earning zero economic profits, but also that all economies of scale have been exhausted. There is no way to produce the output at a lower average cost of production. Thanks for watching.